and gentlemen, I am your captain tour guide for today's trip. Welcome to our trip. As your captain, I want to know, how are you today? Are you good? Are you taking your rest? Well, sit back and relax as me and my co-tour guides will show you a lot of information for today. If you have questions and clarifications, feel free to ask our other team members or other tour guide. Thank you.
That's right, Sophia. Amidst this pandemic, nothing will stop us from spreading good vibes and information.
Very well said, Cathrina and Sophia. And for today's topic, we want to know how well do you know the history of psychological testing? And if you're interested, don't skip and join with us until the end of this video.
We guarantee you that you will learn and explore more about history. Just make sure to have a pen and paper with you as you will write down notes along with our trip.
What are we waiting for? Let's start and enjoy the rest of the trip. Don't forget to smile.
Hello, I am Sophia, the captain tour guide of this tour, and for today's trip, I am going to show you the history of psychological testing. Let us first define psychological testing. Psychological testing is a standardized measure of behavior. It is used to predict behavior and it is a varying level of skill, knowledge required to administer different tests. While psychological assessment is the integration of information from various sources, and it is done to answer questions and make recommendations. The history of psychological testing starts with the Chinese civil service testing. Rudimentary forms of testing date back to at least 2200 BC, when the Chinese emperor has his officials examined every third year to determine their fitness for office. Such testing was modified and redefined over the centuries until written exams were introduced in the Han Dynasty. The next one is the brass instrument era of testing. Experimental psychology flourished in the late 1800s in continental Europe and Great Britain. Human abilities were tested in laboratories with objective procedures that were capable of replication. The problem with experimental psychology was that it mistook the simple sensory processes for intelligence. They used assorted brass instruments to measure sensory thresholds and reaction times, thinking that such abilities were at the heart of intelligence. Wilhelm Wundt founded the first psychological laboratory in 1879 in Leipzig. He believed that the speed of thought might differ from one person to the next.
Hi guys, I'm Kylla. Make sure that you are all complete as we go along with our second part of our trip. So next is Francis Galton. So because of his efforts in division practicable measurement of individual differences, Galton is often regarded as the father of mental tests. So Galton and the first battery of mental tests. So Francis Galton in 1812 to 1911 pioneered the new experimental psychology in Great Britain. He was obsessed with measurements. Galton demonstrates that individual differences not only exist but also objectively measures. Galton continued the tradition of brush measurements, with procedures were much more amenable to the true recollection of data from hundreds, if not thousands, of subjects. He demonstrated that objective tests could be devised and that meaningful scores could be obtained through standardized procedures. So next is James T. Cattell. So James Cattell imports the brass instrument for us. James McLean Cattell studied the new experimental psychology with both Wundt and Galton. So before settling to Columbia University, when for 26 years he was the undisputed dean of American psychology, Cattell wanted to study also the individual differences. He invented the term mental test, and Wessler made experimental psychology turn away from the brass instruments approach. In 1905, Binet introduced the scale of intelligence.
That's right, Kylla. Hello, good day, I am Cathrina and I will show you around Alfred Binet. Let's go. Alfred Binet invented the first intelligence test in 1905. He was a prolific researcher and author long before he turned his attentions to intelligence testing. He also argued that intelligence could be better measured than higher psychological processes than elementary sensory processes such as reaction time. Binet and Simon were called to develop a practical tool for selecting children for which special placement in schools were needed. Thus arose the first formal scale for assessing the intelligence of children. The scale was appropriate to measure the entire gamut of intelligence. The purpose was classification and not the measurement. These are some of the important information in the revised Binet-Simon scale. First, 30 items in order of difficulty. Second, memory, judgment, and reasoning. Third, distinguish younger from older children. Fourth, scores increase with age for each child. Next, scores correlated with school grades and teachers' ratings of intelligence. And the last one would be test distinguish MR from normal children.
Hello, I am Erika. I will be your fourth tour guide. Ready with your pen and paper? Because I'm sure you will be getting a lot of information here. First, tackle the testing from the early 90s to the present. With the successful applications of Binet's mental test, psychologists hoped that their interventions could have pragmatic significance for many different segments of society. The proportions of tests developed early in the 20th century help shape the character of contemporary time. The next one is the Binet-Simon immigration. When Catherine visited Ellis Island, he became convinced that the rates of living indebtedness were much higher estimated by the physicians who staffed the immigration service. He became an apostle for the use of intelligence tests to identify the feebly-minded immigrants. Goddard's scholarly views were influenced by the social ideologies of his time. One is the testing for giftedness by Theta Hollingworth. One of the earliest IQ tests was the testing for giftedness. Hollingworth demonstrated that children with high genius showed significantly greater school achievement than those of the mere or ordinary genius. She dispelled the belief that gifted children should not be moved ahead in school because they would lag behind the older children in penmanship and in motor skills. Advanced the science of IQ testing, she proposed a revolving fan from which gifted children could draw for their development. The next one is the Stanford Binet, the early mainstay of IQ. It was Stanford professor Lewis M. Terman from the period of 1857 to 1956 who popularized the IQ testing of the Binet scale in 1916. The Stanford Binet was a substantial revision. It was the standard of intelligence testing for decades.
Oops. Hi, I'm Kim. Forget about me. Don't worry, because I'm gonna show you more about our tour and this will be exciting. Group tests and the classification of World War I Army recruits. Researchers sought group mental tests to supplement tests imported from France. Group tests were slow to catch on, partly because the early versions still had to be scored laboriously by hand. Robert M. Yerkes convinced the U.S. government and the Army that all of its recruits should be given intelligence tests for purposes of classification and assignment. It gave rise to the Army Alpha and the Army Beta. Early educational testing. Yerkes' grad scheme for testing Army recruits helped to usher in the era of group tests. Machine scoring was introduced in the 1930s, making objective group tests even more efficient than before. Development of the aptitude tests. Aptitude tests measure more specific and delimited abilities than intelligence tests. A single aptitude test will measure just one ability domain. The development of aptitude tests lagged behind of the intelligence test for two reasons. First, statistical A new technique, factor analysis, was often needed to discern which aptitudes were primary and therefore distinct from each other. Research on this was not refined until the 1930s. Social. The absence of a practical application for such refined instruments, it was not until World War II that a pressing need arose to select candidates who were highly qualified for very difficult and specialized tasks.
Personality and vocational testing after World War I. It was not until World War I that personality tests emerged in a form resembling their contemporary appearance. It was needed to detect which army recruits were susceptible for psychoneurosis made by Woodworth. In addition, the MMPI introduced the use of validity scales to determine fake bad, fake good, and random response patterns. The origins of projective testing. The projective approach originated with the word association method pioneered by Galton. Also, the Rorschach ink pods.
The development of interest inventors. Psychologists were devising measures for guidance and counseling of the masses of more normal persons. The interest inventory, which has roots going back to the Third Reich.
So next is the beginning of the structured personality test. So in the beginning of the 1940s, personality tests began to flourish as useful in the clinical evaluation and also for the assessment of the normal spectrum of functioning.
The expansion and proliferation of testing. In the 21st century, the reach of testing continues to increase, both in one-to-one clinical uses and in group testing of societal applications.
So I will also explain to you the evidence-based practice. So when we say evidence-based practice, it is the integration of research evidence with clinical expertise and patient values. The advance of evidence-based practice is that it became part of worldwide trend to require proof treatments and interventions that yield to measurable and positive outcomes.
And that was a long trip. Did you guys enjoy it? And did you guys get a lot of information? We all hope that you do.
History of psychological testing really helped us a lot in reaching to what we have now in the present. That's why it is a very good thing that you guys joined in such trip like this. For us to know everything and for us to have the knowledge about the history.
We would like to say thank you for joining us until the end of this video.
We hope that you enjoyed and gained a lot from this trip.
It was nice meeting you all. Hope to see you guys on our next trip. Bye!
As the captain tour guide of this trip, I want to say thank you and goodbye.
See you on the next trip. Thank you.